Right now, though, I want to talk about public transit and the cost of public transit. I mean, from a philosophical standpoint, I think a lot of people say, of course, we need more public transit. We need to get from point A to point B as economically and as conveniently as possible, right? Sure, we can do that, and we have to do that. But the cost is starting to become a factor. If it wasn't always a factor, it certainly is now. One of the big projects the Ford government is supporting is called the Ontario Line, and it's basically a line that's going to go from, well, it's actually on Ontario Place to the Science Centre, so it's kind of cutting across diagonally through downtown Toronto. And it looks like that line could cost taxpayers a lot more than first thought. Global Sandy Salerno has some details.
The province first put the estimated cost of the 15-stop subway line at $10.9 billion. Flash forward 3 years later, and it appears the estimate could be almost double that. Infrastructure Ontario says 2 contracts for the project were awarded earlier this month, and already the province has spent $15 billion between them. There's still another contract for the northern portion of the line to be completed, and the estimated cost for that is expected to range between $2 and $4 billion. Add all 3 together, and voila, the total cost of the contracts could hit between $17 and $19 billion. The NDP is blaming the spiraling costs on the public-private model that is used to deliver many infrastructure projects in Ontario. For its part, the Ministry of Transport says the project is not exempt from challenges other construction projects are facing right now, including soaring inflation costs. Sandy Salerno, Global News.
Well, let's talk about cost. And to do that, we're so pleased to welcome back to the program John Best. John is the publisher of the Bay Observer. John, thanks for being with us today. A very, very important day with what's going on in Ottawa. But we can't lose sight of what's going on here, and the cost of public transit is something you've been studying for an awful long time, and the cost of it, too. And are you surprised by the estimate now that's coming for that Toronto project?
I'm not surprised at all, Bill. We've been seeing this coming for quite a while. Late last year, last fall in Calgary, where they already have an LRT system, but they're looking at expansion of that system. And their own staff member who's in charge of their LRT team just frankly told council, he said, I have no confidence that we're going to be able to stay within the budget. Not only that, he told them that there was what's happening is that municipalities are actually competing with each other to get contractors, and it's more not really contractors, it's now consortia of contractors that they're actually competing to get people to even bid on some of these projects. So, frankly, it's not a surprise, and certainly the amount of the cost overrun is really alarming. It's almost double in Toronto, and there's no reason to expect that we're not going to run into the same situation here in Hamilton and pretty much everywhere else.
We've all heard the stories about the Ottawa situation and how much that's cost, and more than anybody could have ever imagined. And as I said, there's 2 different, trails here, John. On a philosophical basis, I think everybody says, yeah, public transit's a good thing. We need to do that, get people out of the cars. It's an environmentally good idea, as long as it's 2 things. It has to be convenient and it has to be cost-worthy. And I don't know that we're heading down that road, because the cost factor here of even building it is something that a lot of people just kind of shove to the side and say, yeah, but it's going to be great once it's done. But who's going to pay for it?
Well, you know who's going to pay for it. It's and there's the other problem, Bill, with the capital works projects at the government level. We really got used to the 1.5–2% interest rates. We're now looking at a prime rate of probably going to get up to 5%. That's the kind of, in fact, I heard the city yesterday, they were going through a budget exercise, and a member of staff told the council that the future cost of capital projects is probably going to be in the 5% range. So we've really seen the cost of money, if you will, the cost of borrowing has almost doubled since the pandemic began. And with public transit, we know it never pays for itself, so that's not the expectation. But I guess the question is, how much debt, how much can we absorb? And we could see a situation where there has to be some retrenchment on some of these projects because the money is just not available.
Well, we know that Hamilton City Council, of course, has begun budget deliberations for 2023, just the initial stages of it. We get that. But they got a bit of a headache earlier this week when Nick Winters, who's the director of Hamilton's Water, said that in the upcoming budget, there will be a $10 million unforeseen infrastructure bill due to work on the LRT project that's expected to begin next year. I don't think anybody saw that coming, and even those that supported the project figured, well, that's going to be covered. Not if it's going on in the municipal tax bill. It's not. That means Hamilton taxpayers are going to be on the hook.
To be frank, I doubt if 10 million will cover it, Bill. There's, as we saw with the sewage leak that came out earlier this week, we simply don't know what's underground. Some of the infrastructure that's there has been there for, we're talking about 100-year-old pipes yesterday. So you really don't know in construction until you actually do dig into the ground and see what's there.
Remember, John, you and I had that conversation a year or two ago. It's like watching the Property Brothers on TV, and they're great, and here's the estimate, and this is going to look fabulous, Mr. and Mrs. Best, when it's all done. And they start prying the walls off and said, whoa, we didn't know that was there. And bingo, there go the costs. Well, it's the same thing when you dig a hole in the ground in a city.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and the question is, can with the cost of money, with the overall inflation, with the shortage of contractors that are qualified to do the work, you add all that up, and you have to ask yourself, is what we thought we could do 2 years ago what we really can do in today's reality? And that's going to be a big issue facing government everywhere.
So who's going to have the courage to bring this up? You look at the new council in Hamilton, for instance, and a lot of new councillors in just about all the municipalities these days, some of it because of attrition. And I don't know, we haven't done a head count, but I'd say 90 or 95%, if not 100% of the people on that council are still supportive. Well, I can think of a couple that weren't, but just kind of go along with the crowd. But who's going to have the courage to stand up and say, wait a second, can we have a discussion about whether or not we can afford to do this now, or at least do all of it now?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how that all gets squared with all the demands that the council is facing. They not only were yesterday's budget debate was mainly about introducing how the water and wastewater system works and the costs of running that, but they also heard from people that are looking for money for affordable housing. The demands are coming in from every possible direction. And, it's going to be a sobering exercise, I think, Bill. I think probably the financial challenges facing this council are greater than anything we've seen in the last 5 or 6 terms.
Well, do you remember the old days when the number of councillors, and I even forget which incarnation of the provincial deal that was being offered it was, but okay, we'll vote for this, but as long as not one cent of it's going to be paid for on the tax base. Well, here's 10 million right off the bat, and there's more coming, as we know. I don't know if people have an understanding of this, and I'm not suggesting let's scrap the project, because that's not going to happen, not with this council anyway. But they better have a realistic conversation about where the money's going to come from. And if they're going to dedicate all this and say, no, we got to pay every penny of this, you tell me what else is going to be given up now. They were already looking at about a 7% tax increase, and that's going to be onerous on Hamilton taxpayers. We don't know what's going to happen in some of these other municipalities right now. Do they have a realization, John? You've been following even the early days of this council. Do they have a realization of the financial crises that they're facing right now? There's no COVID relief money coming in that they've had for the last couple of years. That's gone. You've got these costs. The construction of the LRT is going to begin. That's going to start costing money, and that's on top of all the other capital projects that they're looking at right now.
Well, and then add to that, first of all, what we don't know yet, and in fairness to council, nobody's shared any information with them about the operating and maintenance cost of in the case of Hamilton, the LRT, and other than Metrolinx, Phil Verster at one point said it could be $30 million a year. And that was dismissed by the mayor of the day, who said, no, 5 or 6 million is a more realistic number. We'll find out who's right about that. But now we have this added issue that with these recent changes that the government announced where they're taking away the ability of municipalities to charge development fees in certain areas, the estimated costs across Ontario was somewhere in the area of $1 billion. Our share of that is probably going to be, who knows, but it's probably going to be tens of millions of dollars, which is essentially a download from the provincial government.
Let me ask you something else, just to remind our listeners about this, because the reason that this project did all of a sudden move forward as quickly as it did was because the provincial government, of course, changed their minds, and the feds came up with a big pile of money as well. So there was a collaboration between the two levels of government, and bingo bango. But my understanding, if I recall it correctly, John, that money is capped. In other words, you can't go back to them and say, hey, there's been a 20% increase. Can you pony up some more money? They say it is what it is. Go build this with this amount of money.
Well, that's not going to happen, Bill. I mean, we see what's happening in Toronto with their project. We get the Calgary experience. There is absolutely no way that Hamilton's project can come in at the $3.4 billion that's been estimated, unless it's shortened or some other adjustment. I mean, that's not the way construction is working in 2022. It's cost overruns. It's supply shortages. It's not enough people to actually do the work. So the chances of ours coming in on budget when everybody else is experiencing these really significant cost overruns, I don't think that's realistic at all.
Well, and we saw this with the stadium construction. Sorry to bring up a sore point with an awful lot of people. But quite aside from the political haranguing that went on there, they couldn't get the work done in time. That's all there is to it. And as you've talked about, that was how many years ago now? It's more treacherous now because there just aren't enough people working. I mean, try to find, even if, forget about building an LRT, if you want to build a deck extension, good luck getting a contractor before the spring or the summer if you're lucky, because there's just not enough people out there working, and they can't find staff to fill these holes right now. There's a real problem going on here, and I just don't want people to naively think, oh, yeah, we're going to proceed, everything's going to go on schedule, and, yeah, we got all the costs covered, because you don't, and you don't know what the schedule is going to be now.
No, you don't, and it's a problem that's going to have to be faced at some point, and it's going to happen in this term of council. I mean, we are going to reach a point where tenders will be sent out, and people will be invited to bid on the Hamilton project, and we will see what we will see. But what we're already seeing, I mean, the days of the old tender process where the competing bidders put in their sealed bids, and then they open the bids, and we see who's the low bidder. Those days are gone with projects like this. The construction industry simply will not take the risk of submitting a fixed price and saying, okay, we'll do it for that. So the risk is spread around, and so that means even if there are cost overruns, everybody's going to have to pick up a piece of it, and that adds to the uncertainty. But it's all part and parcel of the uncertainty of mega projects right now, and the complexity of trying to bring them in on budget.
It's going to be an interesting debate. John, as always, thanks so much for the time today. Really appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too, Bill. Thanks.
John Best, publisher of the Bay Observer.